There are kids that aren't getting enough food,
over
that aren't
here
able to shower more than once a
saying
week.
who
This
knows
is going
what
on in
about who
American
knows
detention
what,
facilities
straight
today,
trash.
and President
That's what
Biden
he's talking
refuses
about.
to acknowledge the problem. Part of dealing with the problem is to first admit there's a problem, and President Biden doesn't even want to acknowledge it. And then, on the heels of this border crisis that is going on right now, there's a bill on the House floor to create amnesty, to create a bigger
This is not
package.
amnesty. It's
Say,
talking
come
about
to
the
southern
DREAM
border.
Act, you
The
idiot.
Homeland Security Secretary has been pressed repeatedly the last few days to tell people to stop coming across the border illegally, and he won't do it. He says, well, don't come right now, as if there's a time to break the law. Let's get back to legal immigration, a system that actually works for America. But when you have a crisis at the border, the last thing you should do is make it worse. That's what this bill does. We should be having an honest conversation about how to make our legal system of immigration work, not how to ignite a crisis at the border and make it worse. We know how bad it is over there. In fact, because of the encouragement to cross the border illegally, there are caravans of young kids coming across. Reports that up to a third
Lies.
of women
They're going with these lies all day
assaulted
to try to kill the
or
DREAM Act.
Stop this humanitarian crisis, reject this bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from New York.
Madam Speaker, we do have a crisis in this country. The crisis consists of a shortage of workers as our birth rate goes down, as our aging goes up.
Representative Nadler over here speaking the truth.
And since economists tell
Let's
us that
hear it.
the number of workers is what produces prosperity, this is a crisis for the country. Fortuitously, we have a situation where we have several million people in this country who are Americans, who were born, who have lived almost their entire lives in America, who, as was mentioned before, find out they weren't born in this country only when they apply for a driver's license when they're 18 years old. They are a resource for this country, and they ought to be legalized.
Speak. Representative Nadler, Judiciary Committee Chair from New York here, speaking the truth.
Remain on the rule of law. Madam Speaker, organizations, associations, and industry leaders from across the political spectrum support passage of H.R. 6, the American Dream and Promise Act of 2021. They include among them United We Dream, Service Employees International Union, AFL-CIO, and these unions do not fear competition. They know it is good. The U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops.
Shout out to the unions.
Apple, and the National Education Association. After closing the books on 4 years of disastrous and inhumane immigration policies, today we begin a new chapter, one based on compassion, reason, and the fundamental values we hold dear as Americans. Passage of H.R. 6 is long overdue. Today's vote will dictate the future of millions of dreamers and recipients of TPS and DED, and will greatly help the economy of this country.
So here we have it, ladies and gentlemen, going live for the American Dream and Promise Act 2021.
33, the previous question is ordered on the bill as amended. The question is on engrossment and third reading of the bill. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it, third reading.
A bill to authorize the cancellation of removal and adjustment of status of certain aliens and for other purposes.
For
That's
what
what we want to
purpose does the
see.
gentleman from Ohio seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I have a motion to recommit at the desk.
The clerk will report the motion.
Jordan of Ohio moves to recommit the bill H.R. 6 to the Committee on the Judiciary.
Pursuant to Clause 2B of Rule 19, the previous question is ordered on the motion to recommit. The question occurs on the motion. All in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The noes have it. The motion is not agreed to. Gentleman from Ohio.
Ayes for the yeas and nays. Madam
Pursuant
Speaker.
to Section 3S of House Resolution 8, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on the question are postponed.
Silenced. Let's get to this votes.
Pursuant to Clause 1C of Rule 19, further consideration of H.R. 6 is also postponed. For what purpose does the gentleman from New York, Mr. Nadler, seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, pursuant to House Resolution 233, I call up H.R. 1603.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 1603, a bill to amend the Immigration and Nationality Act to provide for terms and conditions for non-immigrant workers performing agricultural labor or services and for other purposes.
Pursuant to House Resolution 233, the amendment printed in Part C of House Report 117-12 is adopted, and the bill as amended is considered read. The bill as amended shall be debatable for 1 hour, equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Judiciary or their respective designees. The gentleman from New York, Mr. Nadler, and the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Jordan, will each control 30 minutes, and the chair recognizes the gentleman from New York, Mr. Nadler.
Hola, Stella. Lo que está pasando ahorita es ellos acaban de terminar el debate sobre el acta de sueños. Ya lo están empezando el debate sobre la acta para los campesinos. So, por el siguiente hora va a ser debate, vamos a escuchar a los representantes demócratas republicanos sobre el acta de los campesinos.
Addresses an issue of critical national importance, the growing labor challenges that are damaging the American agricultural sector. Solving this issue is paramount to the sustainability of American farming. It is also a matter of food security, and thus national security. As domestic food outputs decline, we become more dependent on food imports and more vulnerable to food contamination. The COVID-19 pandemic exposed these vulnerabilities as travel restrictions impacted our food supply chain, and over 500,000 farm workers tested positive for the virus. With fewer U.S. workers turning to agricultural work as their chosen pursuit, most of today's
So with the
farm
Dream
workers
Act,
are foreign
lo que
born.
está pasando con el Dream Act, ya lo hicieron en el debate, ya lo pusieron en pausa para que pueda ser debate sobre el acta de los campesinos. So Dream Act, they just did the debate, now they put that on pause, and now they're putting the farm worker bill up, and they're going to debate that for an hour. When they'll get the results, this is going to go on for an hour, and who knows after that what they'll end up doing. That'll be afternoon their time. So if you're looking for the vote on the Dream Act, I would check back in an hour or so to see where we're at, if they've moved it to a vote or not. So still be at least another hour for the Dream Act.
Visa program, while ensuring fair wages and workplace conditions for all farm workers. This is a bipartisan balanced solution, one that we should all be able to get behind. It is a victory for farmers who have struggled with persistent labor shortages for decades. It is also a victory for farm workers who have worked tirelessly in the field, growing and harvesting food without proper labor protections or any guarantee that they can remain in this country. No acceptable solution can fail to deal with this reality. That's why H.R. 1603 is the right solution. I hope my colleagues will vote today in favor of providing a seat at America's table for those who have long grown the food we serve on it. I want to thank my friend and colleague, Ms. Lofgren of California, the chair of the Immigration Subcommittee, for her leadership and steadfast commitment.
Yeah, all of the Republican voices that spoke up that I heard were absolutely horrible. They were, and we'll see if we do the same thing with the farm worker bill. They have a chance. They have 30 minutes. Democrats have 30 minutes, and we'll see what the Republicans say about this bill.
Thank you, Madam
But it was
Speaker.
all negative that I heard.
Minutes to the ranking member of the Immigration Subcommittee, the gentleman from California, Mr. McClintock.
Gentleman's recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It was no accident that when we finally won control of the border and cut the flow of low-wage labor, Americans saw the strongest wage growth in 40 years, the lowest unemployment rate in 50 years, and the lowest poverty
Yes,
rate
Liz, the
in
new
60
DACA
years.
applications are being taken today. Anybody that has DACA can apply, or eligible for DACA can apply for DACA. But Dream Act, what we're hoping for here, that's still very far off from having any applications.
There's somewhere between 1 and 2.5 million illegal immigrants now working in agriculture, and their families. in a manner that will depress wages not just in agriculture, but in every field of the economy for years to come. If you obeyed the law and came here legally to work, you cannot qualify as a certified agricultural worker. You must have come here illegally, and you must
Take a
have
guess
illegally for
at what
least
party Mr.
1,000
McClintock is a member
hours
of.
in the last 2 years. That's about 13 40-hour weeks a year. You get legal status for yourself and your family for the next 5.5 years. You can get indefinite extensions as long as you work in agriculture 575 hours. That's about 14 working weeks a year. You do this for between 4 and 8 years, you get a green
Absolutely.
card, your family gets green cards, and you're on a 5-year path.
The gentleman from Minnesota was absolutely wrong on the DREAM Act. It does not offer citizenship to criminals, not at all.
In any sector of the economy.
Yep.
Now let me emphasize that if you came here legally and worked the same hours, you're out of luck. If you obeyed the laws, well, you're just a schmuck. It utterly escapes me how America's working families are helped by flooding the labor market with millions of low-wage workers under this program. And as these workers get green cards, they're sure to higher paying jobs, assuring a continuous need for new agricultural workers to replace them. Between the two immigration bills today, somewhere north of 4 million illegal immigrants will qualify for amnesty, legal employment, and a path to citizenship as a reward for breaking our laws. Is it any wonder that our Border Patrol is now completely overwhelmed as millions of economic refugees rush our border in expectation of the same rewards? This bill will bring a tragic end to the blue-collar economic boom that President Trump proudly announced on this floor just a year ago. And here's the real tragedy. During the Trump blue-collar boom, the poorest Americans were making the greatest gains. And it's precisely these American families who will be the most harmed by these amnesty bills. Trump had their back. Biden is on their backs. I yield back.
Wow.
Gentleman from New York.
Ridiculous.
And the speaker, now you have 3 minutes to the distinguished gentlelady from California, Ms. Lofgren.
Gentlelady's recognized for 3 minutes.
Madam Speaker, we have come through a pandemic, our country has, and many of us have suffered. But there's one thing that we can be grateful for, and that's that the food chain was never disrupted. Throughout the pandemic, we could go to the grocery store and there would be food in that store. And for that, we need to thank the farmers of this country, but we also need to thank the farm workers of this country, a majority of whom are undocumented, a majority of whom have been here more than 10 years. Now, what this bill does and how it was formed is important. I want to thank Representative Newhouse, Representative Mike Simpson, Doug LaMalfa, and many others on the Republican side of the aisle. I worked with Jim Costa, Jimmy Panetta, Salud Garhwa, and many others to try and see if we could come together to come up with solutions for the challenges that we face in farm country. We pulled together growers and the Farm Workers Union to talk together for solutions. It took us almost a year of growers and Farm Workers Union, Republicans and Democrats sitting around a table to come up with this bill. And it has basically 3 provisions. The first recognizes that we've had undocumented farm workers in our fields for decades. It allows them to get a certified agricultural worker card so that they can work without fear. That is a temporary worker status. They can renew it, they can travel, pay taxes, and continue forever in that status. After working for a long period of time, they have the option of applying for legal permanent residence if they choose, them and their families. The second provision streamlines an existing program, the H-2A program, so that we will have a legal supply.
H-2A essentially is a guest worker program, allows people to come and work in the fields.
And employers agreed to those streamlines. And the final provision says if we've got a system that works
So what happens if it passes the House?
So we're gonna
The House
have
then
an
decides
E-Verify system
first when to send it to the
used in
Senate.
agriculture.
They can send it immediately, they can send it in a week, 2-3 days. Then once it gets to the Senate, it's up to the Senate to decide to put it in a committee first, to take it to the floor right away. So it could be a matter of days, it could be a matter of weeks, it could be a matter of months, whenever the Senate wants to bring it up.
Growers, the Texas dairymen, and hundreds of other growers. I ask unanimous consent that this be made part of the record.
Without objection.
We have many others, labor, we have the National Association of Counties, United Farm Workers, service employees, U.S. Chamber of Commerce, the Catholic bishops. I ask unanimous consent that this be made part of the record.
Throw it on in there.
We come together
Make it part of the record.
and pass this bill. America will be stronger and better if we do. And I yield back.
Gentleman from Ohio.
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that the gentleman from California, Mr. McClintock, controls the remainder of our.
Oh, come
Without
on.
objection.
Thank you.
Literally heard this idiot talk already. Nobody else, no other Republican has the courage to stand up and say they hate farm workers, so they give it back to this guy.
Madam
Gentleman
Speaker,
from California.
I'll yield 3 minutes to Mr. Biggs.
There you go.
Gentleman's recognized.
Another racist idiot. Let's go. This guy's absolutely insane.
Crisis rages on the southern border. We are here today, once again, debating amnesty for illegal aliens. Promising amnesty to those who are already here illegally
Big time.
encourages more aliens to come illegally. All data for the last 35 years shows that there is this correlative relationship. Instead of voting
Show
on
us the data,
amnesty,
Andy.
voting on
Representative
reforms,
Biggs
close loopholes, and remove
from,
incentives
unfortunately,
for
Arizona.
aliens to come here illegally. That's why I reintroduced the Fund and Complete the Border Wall Act earlier this year and introduced the Stopping Border Searches Act earlier this week.
Which we're not talking about today, Andy.
Real reforms that will have real impacts. The Stopping Border Searches Act fixes problems caused by the Florida Settlement Agreement that prevents DHS from detaining family units for more than 20 days, ensures that unaccompanied alien children are quickly and safely returned home.
And Flores settlement was a judge instructing immigration how to deal with kids. He wants to overturn that decision and make it more difficult for immigrants and their families and children.
Lead to fraud and abuse.
Jerk.
This bill gives the Secretary broad authority to waive grounds of inadmissibility for humanitarian purposes,
Yep.
family unity, or because the waiver is otherwise in the public interest.
It's called
And
justice,
what that
dude.
means is that convicted criminals will have an opportunity to gain amnesty. This
Unbelievable.
bill invites fraudulent applications.
Lie.
Because under this bill, if you apply for amnesty, your receipt serves as your authorization to work. All you have to do is apply for the amnesty, and you will be able to work legally. There is no way that this will not lead to fraudulent filings. This bill establishes grant programs to use taxpayer dollars to help illegal aliens apply for amnesty. Instead of spending taxpayer dollars to facilitate amnesty, we should focus on reducing the deficit. This bill does nothing to secure the border, close loopholes in our immigration laws that encourage illegal immigration. Now I address something that was said in the last debate. One of the representatives said that no Republican has taken her up on going to the border. That's not accurate. When she announced that in Judiciary Committee, I said, I will go with you. I want to go with you. We agreed I would go. Our staffs arranged it. My flight reservations were made. And within about 3 days before going, I was told, there's no more room for you on this trip.
Good. Nobody likes you.
So it wasn't
Nobody wants to hang out with you.
Republican has
If you're a
taken her up.
jerk.
I took her up on it.
Arizona has a border. Why don't you come up to our own home state and go to the border?
Support the previous bill is that 75% of Americans support amnesty. Well, if you're going to rely on polling data, I would inform you that a recent poll said 75% of Americans support the use of voter ID. Well, let's go ahead and fix that then if we're going to rely on voting information.
Let's go ahead and not talk about the bill you're supposed to be talking about.
Voter ID, and let's vote no on this bill. I yield.
Gentleman from New York.
Madam Speaker, I yield 1 minute and 30 seconds to the distinguished gentlelady from Texas, Ms. Garcia.
Gentlelady is recognized for 90 seconds.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in strong support of this bill.
That's right.
Agricultural workers
Representative Sylvia Garcia, Democrat,
and this
Texas.
bill would establish
representing the
a legal
Houston
and
area.
reliable farm workforce. I support this bill because it recognizes the humanity, yes, the humanity of farm workers and their
She
families.
said it.
This is personal to me. I grew up poor picking cotton in the fields of South Texas. I can testify firsthand about the incredibly hard, back-breaking work that farm workers do, especially in the heat of the South Texas sun. Not much seems to have changed since I worked in the fields. Things pretty much still are handled about the same. This bill is long overdue and would provide farm workers with important worker protections and legal rights that I never had and they desperately need today. Texas is home to nearly 250,000 farms, and the need for a strong agricultural workforce is vital. It's vital
That's
to
right.
Texas, it's vital to this country, and it's vital to this world. I urge passage. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I yield back.
Lady yields back.
Nice comment here. European colonizers talking about border security. How ironic. We should deport these
Gentleman's
racists.
recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I thank the gentleman from California. I hear a lot from my colleagues on the other side of the aisle about this is not how people should be treated, whether it was with respect to the first bill, the broader
Representative Chip Roy from Texas, San Antonio, Austin area,
or
Republican.
whether it's this bill with respect to farm workers, which is in fact an amnesty bill. But the fact of the matter is nobody on this side of the aisle, nobody I know in Texas disagrees that the system is broken and that we need to make sure that people are treated fairly, treated
Nice.
appropriately. Nobody disagrees with that. The problem is what we're doing is we're putting this bill in front of any kind of enforcement mechanisms that will prevent
Done that for years. Enforcement mechanisms have been
of human beings
passed
because
for
we refuse to
years
do our
without
actual
either of
job
these
under the
acts
Constitution of the
being
United States to
given
secure
their
our borders.
due as we're doing today.
We're just refusing to do it. And then we pass legislation in the name of helping people that, yes, are stuck in a system because we've created this system, because it's so badly broken. And you then create the magnet that empowers cartels and continues the vicious cycle. So today, when this passes off the floor, there'll be a lot of backslapping and congratulations. Isn't this great? Isn't this awesome? Aren't we so proud of ourselves for what we're doing for these immigrants, these workers? But not doing a darn thing to actually fix the system and prevent the flow, prevent the danger, prevent the cartels, prevent the abuses, prevent essentially the indentured servitude that this bill will actually create for the farm workers in question,
Wow.
leaving them stuck with mandates of having to work certain hours as farm workers, continuing the process.
Yeah, Chip Roy is refusing to take up
Sex trafficking,
the fool
human
Biden bill
crime,
and have this debate.
children being abused. Again, as I said before, as we sit here in this august body, not actually amending, by the way, just bloviating, while we're sitting here, some little girl's getting raped in Mexico on a journey because of the pressure that we're causing by empowering cartels to do it.
Wow. That logic is too much for me to follow. The QAnon conspiracy theory things going on here.
Burying our head in the sand. Like I said, go give the press conferences. Go pat ourselves on the back as a body for being pro-immigrant. How is it pro-immigrant to have wide open borders being exploited by cartels, wide open borders with narcotics coming across it, wide open borders with human beings coming across it? And by the way, when this Biden crisis ends, when the media says it's ended, if they ever acknowledge it exists, it will be because numbers are going down in facilities because catching and releasing is going up. That is what's going to occur.
Done with your lives,
Gentleman's
Chip.
recognized 30 seconds.
I thank the gentleman from California. That is what is going to occur. To my fellow citizens back home in Texas and Americans, when those numbers go down in facilities, don't kid yourself. Illegal immigration will continue. They'll be catching and releasing illegal immigrants. They will be dropping numbers down in facilities. They will close the FEMA plant in Midland, the FEMA facility in Midland, and we will have as much illegal immigration as we have right now.
All these code words you're going to see in the Senate as well. These are the same arguments they'll be doing
Coming at us.
that have no basis in reality.
Amnesty instead of securing the
Gentleman from New York.
Madam Speaker, I now yield 1 minute and 30 seconds to the distinguished gentleman from Arizona,
Gentleman's
Mr.
recognized
Stanton.
for 90 seconds.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and I want to say thank you to Chair Nadler and
One of our fine congressmen here from Arizona, Greg Stanton.
I rise in support
Expect him to say nothing but positive stuff. Let's hear it, Greg.
Bipartisan bill that will improve the H-2A agricultural visa program to make it easier for Arizona farmers to meet their workforce needs while also providing a path for agricultural workers to earn legal status. Throughout this pandemic, farm workers have been on the front lines of playing a critical role in feeding America's families. They deserve the opportunity to take steps towards legal status in this country.
There you go.
It's the right thing to do for them, and it's the right thing to do to advance our farm industry. This bill is good for Arizona's economy. Arizona, the birthplace of Cesar Chavez, where agribusiness is a $23 billion a year industry. And our state's crops cannot be left to rot in the ground because we lack access to a stable workforce. Passing this bill today brings us one step closer to ensuring that farmers have the stable workforce they need and farm workers are recognized for all the work they do for us every day.
There you
Thank
go.
I yield back.
Good comment here. They still deny white privilege when this
Madam
morning we
Speaker, I
learned
moved, 2.5
about the
minutes.
Asian hate murder by a white man.
Gentleman's
He said he just had a
recognized for 2.5
bad day.
minutes.
You believe that
Thank you,
stuff?
gentleman from California. It's stunning to me that
A hate president
we are
leads to hate murders.
Still wrestling through these type of issues. We've been watching over the last few months one radical piece of legislation
Representative
after
Jody
another,
Heasey
and
from
our
Georgia.
country is beginning to suffer. We're watching gas prices go up, skyrocketing. We're still shutting businesses down. We're still seeing schools closed. We are watching our energy independence be reversed. It's one horrible bill, one horrible policy after another. And now we are watching a catastrophe on our
What
southern
the hell is this guy
border.
talking about?
And Madam Speaker, my friends on the other side of the aisle appear to not care what's happening at the southern border. We've yet to have it honestly called for what
How
it
can he
is,
say
a
that? How can this guy
disaster.
honestly say that?
We are not willing to look at the national security issues of it. We're not willing to look at the danger that's occurring, the cartels, the human trafficking, the drug trafficking, the criminals that perhaps are coming across our border, the terrorists who may be coming across our
Didn't
border.
4 years
And
of
now
Trump
what do we
fix
do?
all that?
We're looking
Didn't you
at
guys make America great again and secure the border?
legislation that says
Isn't that what he was saying when he was getting reelected? And now 3 months later,
And it
it's not
doesn't
secure
matter
anymore?
What your background, it doesn't matter who you are. At the same time, we even have here around Capitol Hill fences guarding us, guarding the American people from the people's house, but we're going to open up our borders for who knows who to come marching through. And now we have a piece of legislation that says just come work on a farm, and we're going to give you amnesty. 1.5 million people.
Just come work on a farm. How would you do a week? Do a week in the farm, work that,
This is going to
pick
shield
tomatoes for a week, and come back and tell me how easy that is, and how these folks who feed us daily don't deserve legal recognition in this country.
And we don't know.
Miguel, been waiting for 23 years, here since he was 3. He wants to hear the damn vote, so sit down.
It's frightening.
We're ready to vote. We're ready to get us the DREAM
It's
Act.
endangering American lives.
Wouldn't last an hour.
It is
I
encouraging.
doubt it.
Even
You get out there,
more
you forget his sunblock.
disaster and danger
In
on our
30
southern
minutes,
border.
he'd be back in.
It makes absolutely 0 sense for us to proceeding with this type of irresponsible legislation. And I urge my colleagues to vote against that. This,
Yeah,
and with
right.
that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from New York.
Exactly. Trump made everything great, and now, Cindy, you know, now they're just saying,
Recognized for
oh
90
no,
seconds.
we were wrong because Biden won, so now everything's reversed.
This is not amnesty, and I thank the gentlelady from California, Ms. Loughran, for her leadership, and Mr. Nadler as well. Let me explain to you that under the Dream and Promise Act, immigrants are eligible for that. They would have 43,500 homes and $340 million in mortgage payments. Today I rise in support of 1603 because this would allow farm workers, agricultural workers, to be able to earn legal status and to be able to seek a certified agricultural worker status. Dr. Ruiz, our colleague, indicated that he was raised by farm workers. He saw the bent hands, the bent backs, the broken hands. but he saw the patriotism. This is not amnesty, but what I tell you, it is not. It is not the Trump policy of caging children
That's
in
right.
cages.
That's
It's not
right.
the Trump policy of turning young 11-year-olds
Speak.
back across the border to be raped. I hope my colleagues who are talking about abortion and talking about rape voted for the Violence Against Women Act to really protect immigrant women. I rise to support this legislation because it will provide dignity, opportunity for enhanced economic engine as the farm workers take certified status because they can do it over and over again. Where is the bread on our table coming from? The hardworking farm workers every day that are out in these fields working to provide for the American people and the people around the world. We are the breadbasket of this world, and because of their work, we're able to feed as many. So I rise in enthusiastic support. I wish my colleagues would have been as enthusiastic and as angry about caging children as they are today about us fixing the immigration system. I yield back.
Representative Sheila Jackson Lee has been a champion for our community for many, many years and always inspired by her words.
Speaker, I can assure the gentlelady from Texas, we are outraged by the fact that this administration's policies and pronouncements have encouraged thousands upon thousands of children to be placed on that trail of terror in the hands of Mexican criminal cartels and brought here in the expectation of admission, an expectation that this administration is fulfilling. And I must also assure her that this certainly is an amnesty bill. It allows anyone who's here illegally, who can claim to have worked the equivalent of 13 40-hour weeks over 2 years, legal status, amnesty. And the documentation can be as little as having a friend vouch for them. I now, sure.
Let me just say that we
Let's
can respect
have it.
each other's
Let's have it.
differences, and I thank you for explaining that. Amnesty is not related to people working to earn their status, and that's what this bill does, just as the DACA bill does. They earn their status. I yield
Reclaiming my
back.
time, this only applies to illegal aliens. If you are legally here, obeying our laws, you're out of luck with this bill. What this bill says
You're talking about people
is if
from outer
you're
space,
here
or we're
illegally
illegal aliens?
and can have a friend vouch for you that you've worked 1,000 hours over the last 2 years in agriculture. Again, that's the equivalent of 13 40-hour weeks. You get legal status. This is one of the many reasons why we are seeing this response from around the world now flooding our southern border. I'm now pleased to yield 3 minutes to the gentlelady from Indiana, Ms. Sparks.
Gentlelady is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's unfortunate that Congress cannot have a serious conversation about immigration, because we do have actually a real problem. We have a real crisis at the border. It's humanitarian crisis, Wild West. We're a country of laws. We have problem with legal immigration. It needs to be streamlined, better serve our national interest. We have problems with visa processes, and we can do better. But unfortunately, we're passing a lot of bills that probably will not see the light of the day in the Senate. They're not going to become legislation. We do grandstanding drama and constant rhetoric. And it is very unfortunate for me because American people are tired from our institution not doing its work, because we are policymakers and we are legislators, and we have to work on policy, not on political drama. So as a member of Immigration Subcommittee, I encourage my colleagues actually to start working in committees on legislation, not send legislation from the Speaker's office to the floor, but actually have reforms and work at it, because our people deserve it. And our people deserve to have a branch that works for the people, not have executive and judicial branch doing our functions. So I hope we will have some very constructive and serious conversation on immigration, and I'd be happy to have part of it. But these piecemeal approaches are not going to work and are not good for our country. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlelady yields back. Gentleman from New York.
Madam Speaker, I now yield 2 minutes to the distinguished gentleman from Idaho, Mr. Simpson.
Gentleman's recognized for 2 minutes.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. Madam Speaker, I rise today in support of the Farm Workers Modernization Act. For years, my constituents have been asking me to fix our nation's broken immigration system. They have told me that the shortage of legal workers in agriculture is wreaking havoc on our farmers and rural communities. That is why I joined with my good friends Representative Newhouse, Diaz-Balart, and Lamatha to come up with a bipartisan solution to this problem. And along with Chairwoman Lofgren and and other Democratic colleagues, we created a bill to create a merit-based agricultural immigration system for our nation's food producers and make much-needed reforms in the H-2A program. But don't just take my word for it. There are over 250 agricultural industry groups from all across America that have written to Congress to support this bill. From potatoes and dairy in my district to citrus and strawberries in Florida and California, growers agree this bill is good for agriculture and good for our country. But I want to take a moment to address the current situation on our southern border. What's happening there is a crisis, and we must address it. We all realize that. Unfortunately, years of congressional inaction has made immigration a toxic word. This bill is not about what is happening on the border, but that seems to be what all the debate is about. What's happening at the southern border? This bill is not amnesty. It does not grant anybody amnesty. It allows individuals to get right with the law and to become legal workforce in the United States. It's about providing a stable legal workforce for the people who put food on our tables. This isn't a perfect bill. No one would agree that it is. But it's a very good compromise that actually gives us a chance to solve a real problem for our constituents. That's why I came to Congress to do those things, and I urge my colleagues to support this legislation. I yield back.
Gentleman
There you
yields
go,
back.
there you
Gentleman
go.
from California.
Madam Speaker, no one disputes that this bill is a huge windfall to big agriculture. The problem is it comes at the expense of American workers. I am now pleased to yield 4 minutes to the, actually I will reserve my time.
Gentleman reserves his time. Gentleman from New York.
Madam Speaker, I now yield a minute and 30 seconds to the distinguished gentlelady from Texas, Ms. Escobar.
Gentlelady is recognized for 90 seconds.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be very clear, Madam Speaker. Farm workers do back-breaking work to make sure that all of us have food on our table. Under scorching sun, unbearable cold, whether they're sick, feeling well, whether they have family members who are not feeling well, they go to work to make sure we have what we need, even and almost especially during the era of COVID. It is incredible that anyone would stand in the way of having these incredible people finally have a pathway to legalize. The Farm Worker Modernization Act is a piece of legislation that is long overdue. I have one thing to say to those who would oppose legislation for this population, even though they benefit from the labor of this population. No tienen vergüenza.
Oh.
Shame. Madam Speaker,
Ooh.
I yield back.
Gentlelady yields
Can
back.
she drop the
Gentleman from
mic?
California.
Because that was a
Madam
mic
Speaker,
drop.
I yield 4 minutes to the gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Tiffany.
Gentleman's recognized for 4 minutes.
Madam Speaker, while chaos reigns on the border, we have another Democrat jam job before us today. And I would turn to the committee chairman, the gentleman from California. Did you see these bills in your committee?
Not this session, no.
Yes, these bills did not come before this committee for someone like myself who has just joined the committee, did not even have a chance to be able to partake in this bill.
She got elected earlier, you
But I
idiot.
want to express concerns, especially about the H-2A provision in this bill, because I'm familiar. There's a parallel to the J-1 visas that we use in northern Wisconsin in the resort area, temporary visas. And what we've found over the years as employers is that people would figure out how to use the J-1 visa to get into the country and then go job shopping from there. The H-2 is susceptible to the same thing. And due to lax enforcement, we could all live with it if there was good enforcement in America, but there is not good enforcement of our laws here in the United States. So let's cut to the chase here. And the gentleman from California touched on this very well. These bills devalue American workers' labor. In 2019, the greatest increase in wages for people who are in the lower income brackets happened. The greatest increases in decades. I just say to all those working class Americans out there, make no mistake, these bills today are another clear message. You are viewed as replaceable. I yield back.
First thing, man, lift the mask up.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from New
Goes
York.
over the nose, too.
Right now, you have 1 minute to the distinguished Speaker of the House.
Speaker is recognized.
Speaker
for 1 minute.
Pelosi.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. For the recognition, I thank the gentleman for yielding, and once again, I salute him for the excellent work of his committee bringing this important legislation, H.R. 1603, the Farm Workforce Modernization Act, to the floor. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for this critical victory for farm workers and growers who've come together in support of this legislation which ensures that America can continue to feed the world. Thank you to Chair Zoe Lofgren, Chair of the Immigration Subcommittee, for her years of relentless leadership on behalf of farm workers, without which this bill would not be possible. I sang her praises earlier as a former teacher of immigration lawyer and chair of the Immigration Committee. She knows of what she legislates. I think that it's clear to see there are a number of Californians involved in this, and I want to salute Mr. Costa and Mr. Carvajal, who were an important part of this. They represent farmland in California. They know the needs of the workers. They respect the involvement of the growers, and this, again, is a wonderful bill. We salute many members representing every corner of the country whose vision and values have strengthened this bill that has truly been a caucus and Congress-wide effort. And thank you to the United Farm Workers for the outstanding organizing which made this possible. In addition to our work internally, their outside mobilization so important. We're also inspired by the immortal words of our beloved Dolores Huerta, se puede, and yes we can, and yes we will, and yes we are doing. It had been an honor last year at this time to celebrate her 90th birthday in the Rayburn Room, the last event we had before COVID took over. So here we are a year later. This is probably a better celebration. Passing the Farm Workforce Modernization Act and doing so on a bipartisan basis was a source of pride in the last Congress, and it is now. With the Democratic majority in the Senate and President Biden in the White House, when we pass it again, it is with better assurance that it will become law. The bill honors the millions of farm workers who are the backbone of our economy, quietly persevering through harsh working conditions and low wages as they power the farm economy and put food on our tables. As the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops has written, the dignity of work of farm workers and their families is a central concern. Farm workers produce the food that we eat and contribute to the care of our community. This legislation, while long overdue, is urgently needed now in light of the coronavirus crisis, which is forcing our essential workers, farm workers, to live and work under a cloud of fear and uncertainty about their health and their jobs. At the same time, the pandemic has accelerated a labor crisis in the farm economy that endangers farmers and producers and requires action. And this action today is an agreement between the growers and the farm workers. This legislation supports workers and the farm economy with strong, smart reforms. The bill provides a path to legalization for more than 1 million currently undocumented farm workers. No one who works to feed our country should be condemned to permanent second-class status. Bill establishes the agricultural workforce of the future by modernizing the H-2A initiative to that farms have stable, secure workforces. And critically, it demands fair, humane treatment for farm workers by securing fairness in pay, improving access to quality housing, and ensuring robust safety and heat illness protections. Any of us have visited farm workers in the fields, and some of our members have been farm workers themselves or children of farmers, know that the environment, the heat, the chemicals, the rest are a challenge. This legislation is a critical step forward for our workers, for our growers, and the farm economy, but our work is not done. Congress will continue to stabilize the farm economy, protect workers and families, maintain America's agricultural preeminence in the world. And the leadership of President Biden, we will continue to work fundamentally, fully, to fix our immigration system so that we can honor America's proud immigrant heritage and advance a better future for all. Earlier, I quoted President Reagan. I want to do so again more fully. Earlier, I quoted that when I spoke on the floor about Dreamers before, I did so for 8 hours and 6 minutes. I promised this earlier today to be shorter, and so I didn't give as much of President Reagan's speech. This is the last, is what he said. And since this is the last speech that I will give as president, I think it is fitting to leave one final thought, an observation about a country I love. He went on to talk about the Statue of Liberty, Madam Speaker. He said, the torch of Lady Liberty symbolizes our freedom and represents our heritage, the compact with our parents, our grandparents, and our ancestors. It is that lady that gives us our great and special place in the world, for it's the great life force of each generation of new Americans that generates, that guarantees that America's triumph shall continue unsurpassed into the next century and beyond. New Americans. Other countries may seek to compete with us, but in one vital area, as a beacon of freedom and opportunity that draws people of the world, no country on earth comes close. As I said earlier, he said, this, I believe, is one of the most important sources of America's greatness. We lead the world because, unique among nations, we draw people, our people, our strength, from every country and every corner of the world. And in doing so, we continuously renew and enrich our nation. While other nations cling to the stale past, here in America, we breathe life into dreams. We create the future, and the world follows us into tomorrow. Thanks to each wave, President Reagan said, thanks to each wave of new arrivals to this land of opportunity, we are a nation forever strong, forever bursting with energy and new ideas, and always on the cutting edge, always leading the world to the next frontier. This quality is vital to our future as a nation. If we ever close the door to new Americans, our leadership in the world would soon be lost. That being the last speech that I will give as president, President Reagan said, and I think it is fitting to leave one final thought, an observation about the country I love. As we remember the words of President Reagan, I also recall the words of late Cesar Chavez, whose birthday we celebrate later this month. Go. And he said, to make a great dream come true, the first requirement is a great capacity to dream. The second is persistence. Thanks to all of our members, bipartisan members, for their persistence on this legislation, for which I urge a strong bipartisan aye vote, and yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlelady yields back.
Sí se puede.
Madam Speaker, I would remind this speaker that Cesar Chavez was one of the most outspoken adversaries to illegal immigration, precisely because he knew what that did to depress the wages of the legal immigrants that he represented through the United Farm Workers. I now yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Pennsylvania, chairman of the...
and yes, this bill is supported by United Farm Workers.
Thompson. Thank you, Madam Speaker. As Republican leader of the House Agriculture Committee, I have the opportunity to speak with producers nationwide, and overwhelmingly they say the number one issue facing the industry is the lack of a reliable legal workforce. When it comes to farm labor, our immigration system is broken and in desperate need of repair. The Farm Workforce Modernization Act is a step in the right direction, and
and I will vote yes today, but to be clear, the bill is imperfect and must be improved before becoming law. It will not fully address the shortage of legal agricultural workers and may leave our farmers, ranchers, and especially our dairies with critical unmet needs. I filed an amendment that would have addressed these deficiencies that was endorsed by the American Farm Bureau Federation. Though not made in order, I hope the amendment will serve as a starting point in the Senate for necessary improvements. Americans are blessed with a safe, abundant, and affordable food supply, but how long will the food supply last if we do not have an adequate agricultural workforce? This may be a once-in-a-generation opportunity to reform our immigration laws, therefore we must get it right. Madam Speaker, if we fail to address agricultural workforce, we will have food insecurity, and that will lead to national insecurity, and I yield back.
Gentleman from
That'd
New
be a
York.
good one to watch when it goes to the Senate.
Speaker, I now yield 2 minutes to the distinguished gentleman from Washington, Mr. Newhouse.
Gentleman's recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I want to thank the gentleman for yielding. Let me be blunt. There is a crisis at our southern border. You've heard about it from my Republican colleagues and I over the past few days. Just this year, more than 200,000 people have illegally crossed our border, including 4
Representative
known
Newhouse,
terrorists.
Republican, Washington.
We must do something to stop this disturbing trend. The U.S. is a country of law and order. We must continue working to reform our broken immigration laws and enhance our border security. That is exactly what this legislation will do. The Farm Workforce Modernization Act is a truly bipartisan bill, negotiated over many months by agriculture and labor representatives alike to ensure those who wish to come to our country abide by our laws and contribute to our farms, ranches, and local communities. The bill creates an employment and merit-based program for foreign workers to legally work in agriculture, eliminating incentives for illegal migration and strengthening both our national security and our national food supply chain. This legislation streamlines our H-2A guest worker program, giving employers more flexibility and allowing access for year-round agriculture sectors like dairy and horticulture. Finally, the bill phases in E-Verify. So once these laws are in place, we can enforce them and ensure that workers maintain a legal work status. Madam Speaker, I come from one of the most productive agricultural regions in the world, where many of our crops are labor intensive. As much as producers would prefer to hire American workers to work in their fields, their orchards, and their dairies, there simply isn't enough interest among domestic workers to get these jobs done.
Truth.
For decades, Congress has attempted to pass comprehensive immigration reform to address agricultural workforce, but we have been unsuccessful. This bill is the targeted, bipartisan solution our farmers and ranchers need. I want to thank Zolofgren, Mr. Diaz-Balart, Mr. Simpson, Mr. LaMalfa, and many others. I urge my colleagues to support this bill so we can get it to the President's desk for the American agricultural industry. Thank you.
Representative Newhouse from Washington, I'm going to eat a Washington apple in your honor today. Thank you, Senor.
Gentleman's recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you. Now let's acknowledge the reality of what we have right now. A big mess of a situation that hasn't been cured in several decades. We used to have a system of invited workers called the Procedural program. Political battling has caused no new fix in all this time. Similarly,
Representative LaMalfa, Republican from California.
Get right with the law, with background checks, with restitution, and requirements to stay right with their ag worker status. This same bill passed this House through committee last Congress with good bipartisan support. It has benchmarks that must be met by workers that are already here with history in ag, not opening the floodgates to more illegal entry and benefits. More recent entrants are required to remain in ag for 8 additional years in ag work to remain eligible. We have caps in this bill to the current approximately 700,000 workers already here with capped ratchets if more are needed. It establishes an E-Verify for ag with strong biometric screening for all these certified ag workers, something we never had under E-Verify. It codifies the law many of the pieces adopted in the Trump administration H-2A rule, including staggered H-2A, making it much less burdensome for farmers to get these workers, especially dairy, which needs year-round workers and cannot have it now. Would the gentleman yield? Thank you, sir. What this bill is not is amnesty.
even though they may be dismissed as such. Americans have demonstrated they will not step forward to do this work, not with the non-working benefits they can already access. Frequent anecdotes show that those that might frequently quit after a few days because the work is too hard, even at dramatically increased wages. It does not hand out citizenship or allow anyone to cut ahead in line to apply for it. The same goes for green cards, no express way for green cards, not even government benefit eligibility. Simply a way to get right with the law, have a capped pool of already in place ag workers with a legal status, better for the worker, the farmer, and our system of IDing who is in this country currently. A vast improvement of what we have now.
Gentleman from California.
So this, ladies and gentlemen, joining the
Point out
debate
that
on the
last
DREAM
30
Act is
seconds was
paused.
overtime of the
They're
gentleman.
debating the
Gentleman
farm worker
reserved.
bill right now.
Gentleman from New York.
Madam Speaker, I now yield a minute and 30 seconds to the gentleman from California, Mr. Panetta.
Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Farm Workforce Modernization Act would simply protect our existing farm workers and perpetuate an enduring farm workforce. It would do that by modernizing and streamlining our H-2A visa system and by allowing those who are willing to come here to stay here if they continue to work here in agriculture. Now, this bill is a bipartisan bill. It is the right bill because it was a negotiated bill. Yes, it's not the perfect bill, but it is the necessary bill that was formulated after months and months of difficult talks between Democrats and Republicans and farmers and farm workers. Now, during those discussions, unlike what we're hearing today, we put negative politics aside and we focused on the positive policies for the people who are part of the solution to the #1 problem for our farmers. We don't have a domestic workforce willing to do ag labor. So farmers are reliant on immigrants to harvest their products. That is why if we pass this bill today, that is why if the Senate does its job tomorrow, farmers will have a predictable and dependable workforce. Farm workers will get the legality and the dignity that they deserve. And we in Congress will have done our job for our agriculture, for our nation, that both rely on immigrants for our future. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from California.
I'll continue to reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from New York.
Madam Speaker, I now yield 2 minutes to the distinguished gentleman from California, Mr. Costa.
Gentleman's recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to support the Bipartisan Farm Workforce Modernization Act, which is an opportunity to provide meaningful reform that we've been waiting for years. This measure is supported by a coalition, a bipartisan coalition, that includes not only the United Farm Workers and other labor organizations, but a majority of farm organizations across the country. What this is really about is an opportunity to fix a part of a broken immigration system. And I want to thank not only Chairman Nadler, but also Chairwoman Zoe Lofgren and Dan Newhouse for the hard work that they've done to bring this legislation to the floor. Bipartisan support on both sides of the aisle. Let me begin with the fact that food is a national security issue. It is a national security issue, and less than 5% of America's population is directly involved in the production of food and fiber that feeds our nation. And that partnership is between farm workers and farmers and dairymen and women. I know my family represents a third-generation family. Farm workers are some of the hardest working individuals you ever meet. I know because I've worked side by side for years growing up on my family's farm. It's simply wrong that they be subject to living and working under a shadow of uncertainty and fear of being deported. That's not right. This bill's not about the border. The border's been a problem for decades. It's not about amnesty. This is a earned basis to have legal status in America. I've spoken with the hard-working men and women and their young children who work to put food on America's dinner table. And I've seen the hope in their eyes, the hope that we can pass this legislation to provide them legal status, hope for a normal life, for free dread of family separation that often too happens with deportation that hangs over them every day when they go to work. Hope for a chance to change their reality and reshape their story. This measure involves protections, it involves E-Verify, it involves an opportunity to reform an H-2A program for a reliable workforce for American agriculture. We owe it to the individuals who do so much for us. I ask that you support this legislation. I yield
the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from California.
Madam Speaker, I'm pleased to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Davidson.
Gentleman's recognized for 2 minutes.
I thank the gentleman, and Madam Speaker, I rise in opposition to this bill. It purports to solve an important problem for our country's ag workforce, for our ag community, and for food security for our country, but it exploits a bigger problem and a real emergency by creating a gaping hole in our broken immigration system. Rather than address the root issue with our immigration laws, it exploits them. Frankly, I don't know how many non-citizens some of my colleagues represent. I came here to
Representative
represent
Davidson,
American
Ohio.
citizens. This bill disadvantages American citizens, and it disadvantages people who follow our admittedly broken immigration laws and come here legally, and it rewards people who come here illegally. It is going to exacerbate the humanitarian crisis we see at the border instead of cure it. It is not a remedy, it is a harm. It is a harm to American citizenship. It should be treasured. And we do welcome new Americans. We are unequaled in the world. No country welcomes more new citizens per year than the United States of America. We will continue to be the land of opportunity, but we can only do that if we protect the cherished value of American citizenship. Citizenship matters. We cannot destroy it by adopting these policies. I plead that people oppose it, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from New York.
I yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from California, Mr. Ruiz.
Gentleman's recognized for 2 minutes.
I and the Congressional Hispanic Caucus rise in support of H.R. 1603, the Farm Workforce Modernization Act. My parents were farm workers who worked tirelessly day in and day out with calloused hands and tired backs to give me, their children, opportunities that they never had. Farm workers like my parents and like many of my constituents back home in the Coachella Valley taught me the values of hard work, resiliency, and taking care of one another. Farm workers are getting infected and dying from COVID-19 at a much higher rate than the general public. They are literally dying to feed you, give you the nutrients you need to prevent COVID-19 and heal from COVID-19. We must protect and secure our food supply chain. We must pass the Bipartisan Farm Workforce Modernization Act to stabilize our food supply chain and ensure that farmers can meet their future labor needs. The Congressional Hispanic Caucus is proud to work with Chair Zoe Lofgren and Congressman Jimmy Panetta, as well as CHC members Salud Carbajal and Jim Costa and other members to get the bill signed into law. Thank you, and I yield back.
There you go,
Gentleman
sir.
yields back. Gentleman from California.
Madam Speaker,
Consent that the gentlelady from California, Ms. Lofgren, control the balance of our time on our side.
Gentlelady is recognized.
I'm now pleased to yield 3 minutes to the gentlelady from Minnesota, Ms. Fisbach.
Gentlelady is recognized for 3 minutes.
And I thank my colleague for yielding me the time. Madam Speaker, H.R. 1603 subjects H-2A employers to a private right of action in federal court for the first time ever in the history of the H-2A program. The bill does so by applying the right of action standard in the Migrant and Seasonal Agricultural Worker Protection Act, or MSPA, to H-2A employers. My motion to recommit today simply provides that when an H-2A employer faces an H-2A related claim under the SPA, the employer is provided a right to cure before the claim can proceed. Specifically, the amendment allows the employer to attempt to resolve the alleged violation within 5 days of receiving the complaint. The employer must also file with the court documentation demonstrating that the action given rise to the complaint has been remedied. After that, the court may dismiss the complaint if it is satisfied that the complaint has been resolved. Under H.R. 1603, private right of action can include actual damages or statutory damages of up to $500 per plaintiff per violation, where violations constitute separate provisions. Most claims involve multiple plaintiffs, and in class action could involve many plaintiffs who didn't even want to be part of the claim. For class action, the court is authorized to award the lesser of up to $500 per plaintiff per violation, or up to $500,000. In other words, liability under MSPA could be $500,000, especially in the case of a fabricated claim or an unintended violation. This could be financially devastating for farmers. Costs like these to agricultural employers, on top of attorneys' fees, courts' fees, and awards pursuant to other claim avenues, should be taken seriously. They can be significant burdens on employers who did not knowingly or purposefully violate H2A requirements. At the very least, we should allow our growers the opportunity to remedy a potential violation before they are hit with a huge penalty. Today's motion to recommit would do just that. If the purpose of filing a complaint is to seek redress, then this amendment provides a reasonable path forward. I am sure that those whose purpose it is to subject employers to additional claims, frivolous or otherwise, will oppose my amendment. But those who understand the importance of helping U.S. farmers in the face of constant and growing competition from foreign agricultural operations without our high labor standards understand how reasonable a right to cure is. My amendment would retain the ability.
Yield the gentlelady another minute.
Gentlelady's recognized.
My amendment would retain the ability of H2A workers to obtain redress, but would provide important protection for growers too. Madam Speaker, if we adopt the motion to recommit, we will instruct the Committee on the Judiciary to consider my amendment to H.R. 1603 to provide a common sense right to cure for our nation's farmers who will be subject to burdensome litigation under this underlying bill. I ask unanimous consent to insert the text of the amendment in the record immediately prior to the vote on the motion to recommit.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I yield back my
So
time.
Gentlelady
they
yields
will
back.
vote on the DREAM Act
Gentlelady
today.
from
They just
California.
paused it.
May I inquire
Meanwhile,
how
they're
much
taking up the
time,
debate on the farm
remains on
worker
both
bill right
sides?
now.
Gentlelady from California has 9 minutes.
9 more
Gentleman
minutes
from
for the
California has
Democrats.
5.5 minutes.
5.5 minutes for the
I
Republicans
yield,
left on the farm
to
worker
the
bill.
gentleman from Texas, 2 minutes, Mr. Cuellar.
Gentleman's recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Farm work is hard work. My parents, both Odelia and Martin, were farm workers. It's very hard work.
Representative Cuellar,
And
Democrat,
it's one of those
Texas.
type of jobs that's very necessary to make sure that we bring food to the table. I represent several areas that are rural, and my ranchers and my farmers need a ag work program. It has to. They need it. I've always said, if an American wants a job, let them have that job. But if they're not going to fill that position, then we need to have a guest worker plan, just like we did during World War II, when we did the Procedural program. So therefore, we need to support this for our ranchers and our farmers. Now, I'll tell you this, it is not amnesty. What Ronald Reagan did in 1986, that was amnesty. This is not amnesty. And if you want to talk about border security, this will help secure the border. Let me explain. If you have people that will come into a secure system to come work and then they go back, then you can have Border Patrol focus on the people that have the bad motives, the people that want to bring in drugs, the people that want to smuggle or traffic people. So this actually will have border security. We set this up right like they did in World War II. So, ladies and gentlemen, I ask you to support this program. It is needed by our farm workers, and we need to do it. I want to thank the chairwoman for the work, So Laughlin, and Mr. Natler for the work. With that, I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from California.
May I inquire of my friend from California if she has any more speakers?
Gentlelady's ready to close. Gentleman's recognized.
Close it up.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Just yesterday, the Secretary of Homeland Security told the Homeland Security Committee that the border is secure.
Still no vote on DREAM Act
Secretary said
yet.
the border is secure despite saying only one day earlier that the Department of Homeland Security is on pace to encounter more individuals on the southwest border than we have in the last 20 years. He said the border is secure despite a 590% increase in the number of family units crossing the border in the first 6 weeks of the Biden administration. He said the border is secure despite Customs and Border Protection referring over 7,300 unaccompanied alien minors to the Department of Health and Human Services during the month of February. It's the highest number of referrals in any February in the history of the program. He said the border is secure despite the Biden administration's plan to use the Dallas Convention Center to house thousands of the unaccompanied minors that the cartels have smuggled across the border. No matter what Secretary Mayorkas says, the fact is the border is not secure. And it is not secure because of President Biden's dangerous immigration policies. We know that when foreign nationals think they can easily get into the U.S. and be rewarded with legal status, which is what this bill does, they flood the border. We're watching that happen before our eyes, flooding the border in response to the president's rhetoric and policies, and in response to the promises of additional rewards made through bills like this. Talk of amnesty fuels border crossings. That is a fact. This bill grants amnesty and a special path to U.S. citizenship to at least 1 million farm workers currently in the United States. I've seen estimates that go up to 2.5 million. Nobody really knows, as well as to their spouses and children. This bill allows aliens to get green cards even if they illegally re-entered the U.S., committed immigration fraud, voted illegally in a federal or state election, or have 2 serious misdemeanor convictions. Now, the supporters of this bill claim that illegal aliens who get green cards must work in agriculture. However, the bill includes broad waiver authority that allows those who did not complete all of the work requirements because of weather conditions or COVID, or if the alien was fired, among other situations, they still get a green card. Those legalized under this bill will from the outset compete directly for jobs with Americans. Nothing in this bill prevents those who get employment authorization during the initial process from working in non-agriculture labor sectors. And of course, once they and their family members get a green card, as provided under this legislation, they're free to work wherever they want. This bill sends a powerful message and an invitation to those who cross our borders illegally that they can expect to be rewarded with legal status, ultimately green cards, and an expedited path to citizenship. But far worse than that, it floods our market with low-wage labor at a time when Americans are struggling to recover from the devastating lockdowns that have crushed the dreams of so many working families. And I'll start out as I began. The people who were most helped by the economic expansion that we saw were working class Americans, because the Trump administration got control of our borders and stemmed the flow of this illegal labor. They made the greatest gains during the expansion. They have been the most harmed during the lockdowns, and this adds to their burdens and woes by assuring that the market for their skills and their labor will remain stagnant for a decade to come. Please don't do this to those good Americans in this perilous time for our country. I yield back.
Gentlelady from California.
I yield myself the balance of the time.
Gentlelady's recognized.
Now, there's been a lot of rhetoric today about the border, and I think it's important to address some of it. First, let's get the facts straight. The uptick in apprehensions at the southern border began in April of 2020 of last year, long before we knew President Biden was even going to become the Democratic nominee, much less the president. During the pandemic, the Trump administration did something that troubled me a great deal and that I objected to. They ignored the Trafficking Victim Protection Act. That was a bill that was a bipartisan bill. Congressman Chris Smith of New Jersey was the lead on the Republican side. I worked on it. on our side along with others, and it has a very precise protocol for what to do when an unaccompanied child presented at the border a potential trafficking victim. Instead of following that protocol, the prior administration would simply take that child, an 11, 12-year-old little girl, and turn her back into Mexico, not knowing what would happen to her. Now, those children that have been in squalid camps for the last year are being addressed pursuant to the Traffic Victim Protection Act. It's correct that we have had more children present than we were prepared to deal with, and there is a scramble to take care of those children properly, but it has nothing to do with the Farm Work Modernization Act. I listened with some interest to the suggestion that there needs to be a change in the Migrant and Seasonal Agricultural Worker Protection Act provisions of this bill. Currently, H-2A employers must comply with the H-2A program requirements, which largely meet or exceed MISPA. The primary difference is that the DOL stands in the place of the foreign farm worker and bringing forward cases of alleged violation of the H-2A program. The Fair Labor Standards Act and a number of other federal and state laws apply to the H-2A program, but it's worth noting that any H-2A employer that employs one or more domestic workers who perform seasonal or temporary agricultural work is already covered under MISPA, and that would be close to like all employers. So this bill would formally place all employees, H-2A workers, under MISPA, impacting only those who hire no domestic employees. Now, the idea that there needs to be a right to cure has merit, except it's already addressed in this bill because it requires mandatory mediation. If there's a problem that can be fixed, it will be fixed in the mediation system, and that's quite new. The other thing to point out is that there's no attorney's fees provided for in the bill or in MISPA, and so the idea that somehow this is a windfall for the trial bar is simply incorrect. You know, there's a great Q&A truth setting in a publication called Hoard's Dairyman, what the Farm Workforce Act would mean. I'd like to ask unanimous consent to put this into the record, Madam Chair.
Without objection, so, without objection, so ordered.
We have labored long and hard, those of us in our bipartisan group, that work to solve a problem that our country has, which is we need a stable workforce in the agricultural sector. I'd like to thank last year's chairman of the Ag Committee, Colin Peterson, for the work that he did on this, and this year's chair, who also supports this bill, Mr. Scott, as well as the ranking member, who said that he would vote for it, even though there are some things he would like to change. It's a compromise, and it was worked over almost a year to get to this point. We believe that having a legal workforce in agriculture that will give stability is not only good for those workers, it's good for their employers, and it's good for America. We believe that making sure that there is a future flow of a legal workforce, not only into farms, but now into dairy, is good for America because we think immigration ought to be legal. It ought to be regularized. It ought to be orderly. And that's what this bill would accomplish. And finally, there's been a lot of talk about enforcement. Well, this bill has enforcement in it. When the bill is implemented, we will have a strategy and a legal way to meet the needs of agriculture in America. And if we have that as law, we ought to enforce that law. And that's why on a bipartisan basis we agreed that E-Verify ought to be applied to this whole sector. So this is a package that will make America stronger. It's fair to farm workers, it's fair to farmers, and it's good for America. I hope that people will vote for it on both sides of the aisle. So many of us have worked together to bring it to this point. With that, Madam Speaker, I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Pursuant to House Resolution 233, the previous question is ordered on the bill as amended. The question is on Grossman and third reading of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. Third reading.
A bill to amend the Immigration and Nationality Act to provide for terms and conditions for non-immigrant workers performing agricultural labor or services and for other purposes.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from Minnesota seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I have a motion to recommit at the desk.
Clerk will report the motion.
Mrs. Fishbach of Minnesota moves to recommit the bill H.R. 1603 to the Committee on the Judiciary.
Pursuant to Clause 2B of Rule 19, the previous question is ordered on the motion to recommit. The question is on the motion. All in favor say aye. Opposed, no.
No.
The noes have it. The motion is not agreed to. Gentlelady from Minnesota.
Madam Speaker, I request the yeas and nays.
Oh.
Pursuant to Section 3S of House Resolution 8, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, further proceedings on this question are postponed. And pursuant to Clause 1C of Rule 19, further consideration of H.R. 1603 is also postponed.
So the Republicans were trying to get the bill back into committee to debate it and change it more. The no was on that. And then they decided to put a pause on the voting for now. And so the Republicans were not successful. The no's were obviously much more than the ayes. But nonetheless, they said they wanted to have each individual vote counted on the yeas or the no's. Just a procedural thing to slow down the process, slow down progress. You can't stop it, but you can slow it down. So that's what they're doing right now. And now they will be going to get to each individual votes, and no timeline we really have on when they'll come back and vote on the DREAM Act, when they'll come back and vote on this bill. Right now it is still up in the air. Amazing comments, ladies and gentlemen. Really appreciate everybody tuning in and throwing your comments down there. It's been very, very spirited debate. What we saw this morning in the farm worker bill that we just heard, there was numerous Republicans who voted in, or going to vote in favor of it, said very positive things. What I don't like about the farm worker bill is the E-Verify. E-Verify is extremely frustrating because it's a FROC system. It's set up in a way that doesn't work as it's supposed to work, right? So someone wants to apply for a job, they're supposed to go through E-Verify.
Rule 20, the chair will postpone further proceedings today on motions to suspend the rules of which the yeas and nays are ordered. The House will resume proceedings on postponed questions at a later time. For what purpose does the gentleman from New York seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I move that the House suspend the rules and pass to H.R. 1112, the Protect Democracy in Burma Act of 2021 as amended.
Clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 1112, a bill to require a report on the military coup in Burma and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from New York, Mr. Meeks, and the gentleman from Texas, Mr. McCall, will each control 20 minutes.
So there we have it, ladies and gentlemen. They are moving on to other bills right now. We will most definitely go back again when they start doing the voting, when they get back on the floor on either the DREAM Act or the farm worker bill, so stay tuned. And again, I couldn't get your comments up when we were watching the video, but absolutely agree with what folks are saying here. DREAM Act now, that is exactly what we came here looking for. Is TPS included in the bill? In this version of the DREAM Act, yes it is. And the voting has not happened yet. The voting has not happened yet, ladies and gentlemen. Stay tuned and come back in the afternoon. We'll go live again when they come back. But for right now, it looks, even the Republicans were saying this is going to pass today. So there's all expectations. We still obviously want to count the votes. We want to see the votes. But everything we saw right now was the Republicans saying, this is so horrible, it's going to pass, let's put it back to committee. We saw the guy from Wisconsin saying that. 20 years we've been waiting for the DREAM Act. 20 years it's been debated. 20 years it's been rewritten. Now is not the time to go back to committee. Now is the time to pass it, which we expect them to do today. Same for the farm worker bill. It's had over a year of working, and bipartisan Republicans and Democrats support it. There's parts in that I don't like at all. I was talking about the E-Verify, that part really bothers me. But nonetheless, it is a bipartisan bill that gives protection to employers, that gives protection to the workers. And at the end of the day, this is also going to pass the House. You had Republicans get up and take the Republican time to say how they were in support of it, so we think that's going to get passed, no doubt. Most definitely, we have to stay tuned to the Senate, right? The debate is going to be in the Senate, and how we're going to go about getting that passed. We want everybody to be involved. Arizona Dream Act Coalition, go to their page, sign up. We need to push the senators. If you're in Arizona, if you're in California, I don't care what state you're in, we got to make sure that when this passes today, it gets heard quickly in the United States Senate and gets passed and then gets put into law. We do not know, unfortunately, yet what time the vote will be. They're taking up this bill right now, and then when that one's over, they'll probably, hopefully, set a time after that. So unsure right now exactly when they will come back. And most definitely, we'll put the link up when we go live again. So make sure you subscribe to us on YouTube, follow us on Facebook to be updated when the newest one comes out. And thanks again, everybody, for tuning in. But the most important thing to know, we anticipate later this afternoon it will get voted on and it will pass, but it does not mean it then becomes a law. This is the House of Representatives. It's being debated on the floor right there. We think it'll get out here, then it'll go over to the Senate. In the Senate, how it will get changed, you see what the Republicans saw today. They're trying to say there's chaos at the border, everybody's coming across, it's the worst, most chaotic ever. And Representative Lofgren, former immigration attorney, gets up there and says, that's not actually true, because the numbers have been going up since April, which was under your president. Maybe you're trying to manufacture this huge chaotic scene so you can prevent us from passing the DREAM Act, prevent us from passing the farm worker bill. And that's the kind of debate that we expect to see in the Senate, people pushing back big time with those same arguments that we're saying today. So that's it, ladies and gentlemen. Come back in later on. Hope everybody has an amazing, awesome rest of the afternoon, and stay tuned. We'll be back when they go with the votes.